Hello, and welcome to another episode of Hacking with Friends. My name is Cody Kinsey. I am a security researcher at Varonis, and today we have my good friend Alex Lynn here to help us go through the hacker news that happened over the last, actually 2 weeks, because we ended up not going live last week. So we have a lot of stuff to cover, and we are pre-recorded today, although we're in the comments. And the reason for that is we're still recording in Los Angeles, and we have been interrupted by ice cream men, dogs, weed whackers, package deliveries, dogs barking again, the corn man who honks a clown horn to deliver corn.
That's the best.
There's lots of things that have caused us to have to reshoot. So today we're doing this pre-recorded, but again, we are in the comments. So if you have a question, you can always jump in and ask us there. All right, so let's go ahead and get started this week. And probably one of my favorite stories that we've seen is a little bit of a weird reversal. So it's not very often that Microsoft is poking around and finds vulnerabilities in Apple products, but that's actually exactly what happened in the first story that I want to highlight today. So this is something that, again, I just find kind of funny because this actual vulnerability could be used to like jailbreak or otherwise gain root privileges on a Mac. And that's pretty funny because I don't totally know what these Microsoft researchers were doing poking around in like Apple's infrastructure. But again, it's kind of interesting to see the way that they found this and then reported it through a shared program and managed to get it taken care of. So the kind of meat of this is Apple has tried to lock down their computers to make it more difficult for even super users to be able to do certain things on the computer that might damage the system's integrity. And that's called System Integrity Protection, or SIP, is a feature in macOS that prevents some of these commands. And in order to actually get around this, you have to reboot the computer into recovery mode and then manually disable it. And then you can go back and do some of these commands. But I've done a couple things on my macOS computer that required me to temporarily disable system integrity protection because I was trying to do something that kind of clashed against this feature. Now, in order to install things or do other stuff, you need to be basically installing something that is signed or otherwise notarized by Apple. And that has made it a lot more difficult to be able to run arbitrary scripts that require elevated privileges, especially things like jailbreaking or rooting or otherwise getting around the system integrity process. However, what the Microsoft researchers were able to find is that this is a really good process and it's super cool, but you can get around it by doing a couple of things with PostScript installation. So this is a lot of details. It also goes through a list of other ways of bypassing the system integrity protection, abusing dynamic libraries, mounting, abusing entitlements. But this interesting one that they found is basically based on these PostScripts and how you can do stuff in the PostScripts and just kind of tack code onto it, and it runs along with the stuff that has been signed. So this is something that is unique to things that are going to be running PostScript. So that's something that is kind of required here. But it would need to download an Apple signed package, plant a malicious basically file right here, which is something that would be checked by the parent process. And then it would invoke the installer utility to install the package. And that would be able to create something that would basically get around this protection and be able to do something like root your Mac. So you can see a little screen capture of this actually being executed. And it's a really, really interesting way of attacking the system. And the Microsoft researchers really kind of went through the works of creating a proof of concept, showing it off. So this is, I thought, really cool because I follow Patrick Wardle to see the kind of things that malware authors are doing to get around this sort of stuff. And they're always coming up with creative new ways to do it. So although macOS has a reputation for being super secure and has different protections in place to protect the integrity of the system, there are some pretty creative ways of getting around this. And seeing a new one that's been pointed out by the Microsoft researchers here was really cool and interesting. Not sure how well. I'm sure Apple appreciated it. I'm sure they appreciated having this reported to them. So okay, Alex, do you use Facebook?
I don't use Facebook.
Why not?
Yeah, it's not my demographics. Social media.
All right.
Put it that way.
All right. So you're not old enough to use Facebook,
Yeah.
is what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty offensive.
Yeah.
To word it that way.
All right. So one thing that I noticed fairly recently when I had signed up for Facebook again under an alias was that alias got pulled into some pretty crazy conspiracy theories pretty quickly, even by just kind of engaging in politically neutral or otherwise kind of just like not that polarizing stuff. And this was interesting because just by liking a couple things from accounts that were suggested to me when I signed up, this kind of like fake profile was very quickly drawn into a lot of kind of extremist and fringe stuff, especially a lot of anti-vaccine stuff. And I feel like this might have been like the age demographic of the profile that I created, or it could have been other factors like the different groups that Facebook suggests that you start following or liking in order to like get your account fully set up. But something about this really does cause people to be drawn down into these rabbit holes where they start to be fed lots of information that seems like it's everywhere, but really it only exists within that one kind of specific fragment of users. So this study was actually done by Facebook researchers. So they hired a research company to create a fake profile of Carol and then like a couple things that were like pretty mainstream. So they signed up and said that she was a politically conservative mother from Wilmington, North Carolina. She was interested in politics, parenting, and Christianity, and she followed a couple of her favorite brands, including Fox News and the current president at the time, Donald Trump. So after a couple days, Facebook started recommending that she join conspiracy theory groups. So this is not something that she set out, this fake lady set out looking to do. This is something that was delivered to her, and the algorithm started pushing it aggressively, probably because it had figured out that amongst her demographic, those groups had disproportionately successful rates of getting them engaged because it gets them obsessed. So this algorithm, which is designed to find things that people respond to, was inadvertently pushing extremist material directly to this account that was not looking for it in any way, shape, or form. It simply identified that she was vulnerable to that sort of suggestion and started feeding her massive doses of this misinformation and propaganda. So this is why the algorithm at Facebook is so powerful, and also why it is such a problem in so many ways, because there's a lot of cases where somebody will sign up for Facebook and they'll express a couple basic interests, and Facebook will go and find the most extreme version of those beliefs, or things that are an extension of those beliefs that might be way out there, and start distilling those into just invitations to join groups or messages popping up on someone's feed from people that they don't even follow. So this is a pretty invasive way to have these sort of conspiracy theories force-fed you, especially if the algorithm detects that you are vulnerable to these sorts of suggestions. It's really what it's good for and what it's been used to do for such a long time, that these sorts of unintended effects of radicalizing people by feeding them highly engaging content, which is what Facebook wants, but doing it in doses that are harmful, and also having the content itself be harmful because it contains misinformation that put people in danger. So some of the QAnon stuff and some of the other things that were really pushed on this fake account are just examples of how when you have vulnerable people signing up for Facebook, it makes them feel like they are surrounded by other people that believe in the same things, even when that might not be the case. And that's why a lot of these communities are growing on Facebook. It's because these communities are kind of ideal for what Facebook wants to do. It wants to radicalize and splinter people into consuming lots of content on Facebook with people who agree with them, because that's what drives metrics. So, Facebook might have the dream of being a space for connection and whatnot, but in reality, the way that these algorithms work to present content in front of people who are the most vulnerable to it, they're the most likely to spend lots of time staring at it, is not a very human-focused way to develop this technology. It's more just about how many hours of people's time they can suck down by finding something on the platform that's a perfect match. But if that person hasn't been radicalized and they're just in a group that's vulnerable to it, exposing them to extremist ideology doesn't seem like the most balanced way to maintain a working society. But this is a fascinating article. I highly recommend reading it. And just thinking about if you want to do this experiment yourself, creating a fake Facebook account, putting in a couple basic interests and seeing where it leads you, for me, was a pretty shocking experience. So yeah, very, very interesting take on why the Facebook algorithm can be so dangerous in identifying people that are vulnerable to a particular type of propaganda, and then giving them the most extreme type of propaganda for them to just kind of think is coming from their friends and people around them who they might not know but have similar interests.
Pretty terrifying.
Yes. All right. So next up, this is a really weird suit. And I mention it because the 3D printing community has a libertarian segment that makes gun designs. And very little legally has been able to be done about it ever since the government dropped a case where they were asserting that it was illegal to publish these designs online. So once the way was cleared for these designs to be put online, these gun makers started getting, these 3D printed file makers that just happened to be able to be assembled into guns started getting really bold. And they started tagging the accounts of gun control groups with pictures of 3D printed guns with the logo of those gun control groups on them. So obviously they wanted to get some sort of reaction, and they succeeded, because now those gun rights groups are attempting to sue them for infringing on their trademark on these freely available 3D printed parts. So I don't really know how this is going to go. Like, a lot of the time this is either considered parody or free speech, but there's never been a case where, you know, a loose collective of semi-anonymous individuals was just creating designs that infringed on a trademark and not selling them for any money whatsoever.
Who do they hold accountable for that? Like, who do they sue?
That's kind of what I'm curious about. So it seems like they're suing the organization and maybe trying to find information about who did it. They're going after Twitter users. But it's a really interesting case, because I've never seen a case like this before. There have been a lot of cases recently about 3D printed weapons and other sorts of designs online that can be turned into a weapon. But this is the first time I've seen a trademark infringement lawsuit brought against people who are basically mocking these gun control organizations by making special editions of 3D printed weapons that feature that organization's logo.
That's kind of petty, because like they can't do anything about the 3D models being created, so they're just going after the freaking logo.
Yeah,
it's kind of dumb.
It really shows that when it comes to like legal recourse, there's very little that can actually be done against these groups, because frankly, you know, they're not selling these designs for anything. It's been repeatedly found that these designs are free speech, and it's difficult to put restrictions on what's essentially code. A lot of these designs could be, you know, recreated from like 1 or 2 pages of code. In fact, there was one design I saw that was a single page of code. It was ugly. A single page of code could be turned into a weapon. And if you just printed that code out and put it on a piece of paper, in certain states, they were trying to make that possession of that code a felony. So it's really a fascinating legal landscape here with this, and this is just kind of the latest development in the legal saga of people trying to go after 3D printed weapons manufacturers, because again, a lot of these people are not doing it for money. They're just releasing the designs for free. And it's very reminiscent of the software open source community, where these are just put into a community, people remix, change them. It's quite frankly fascinating. But again, it does open them to certain legal actions, such as trademark infringements, when they repeatedly tag gun rights groups on Twitter with these custom designs. So we'll see how this kind of ends up shaking out. All right, so this was super fun. We got to go to Null Space Labs in order to raise some money for the hackerspace, and we got to create a bunch of Wi-Fi nuggets with some cool people, and got to see the space again after a long time. Oh, look, Alex, there you are.
Hey, that's me.
So this was super fun. We haven't done a workshop in like probably a year and a half, so this was our first in-person workshop, and it was great again to see Zam, who was there making sure that we didn't mess anything up and giving us some great suggestions on some of our future shows. So it was great seeing Zam at the hackerspace. And it was also, again, great to see Null Space Labs and raise some money for the space, because they do a lot of really great stuff. So if you're ever in Los Angeles and want to check out a great hackerspace, make sure to check out Null Space Labs. It's a really good resource. All right, so we've talked about this on, I think, maybe it was 2 weeks ago, but there was apparently a breach where the entire Argentinian national database of people's information, of citizens' information, was breached. And it's still kind of up in the air as to whether or not this was a complete breach where someone downloaded the entire database, or if somebody had limited access and was using that limited access to just basically query the system. Now, the Argentinian government is claiming that there was a exposed VPN that was issued to a contractor, and then this person was able to use those VPN credentials to make like 40 different queries and pull out information in order to supposedly prove they had access to the whole database, but they didn't actually, is what the government is claiming. The hacker, on the other hand, is claiming that they have access to the entire database and is not backing down from these claims. It also has recently had their Twitter account taken down. So it's still, again, we don't really know for sure if this information is going to be released or what's going to be done with it, but obviously the Argentinian government is very concerned about it, And it's, again, interesting to see what can happen when this data is left exposed or otherwise accessible, because it looks like the hacker has been able to, well, potentially download a lot of the information and is now offering to sell access to it to people online. So I guess we will see who's telling the truth in the coming weeks. I barely want to talk about this topic. So there was a new standard created for let's say sex toy, like smart sex toys, and the crux of it is they've definitely let some of the cybersecurity details slide, as this says. And really, what's going on here is there's so many things that people skip out on when it comes to just making the damn thing, that these sorts of things that are included in this basically are to prevent it from catching fire and not from really embarrassing situations that could come from this. So an example cited here was a chastity cage, which could only be unlocked via Bluetooth. However, there was a way for a hacker to impersonate the official server of this application and make it so that this device was forcibly locked and would be unable to be unlocked without paying the hacker. So sort of a ransomware for this cage, this intimate cage.
Imagine being caught in that situation, just like.
And I guess the only way to get out of this was an angle grinder.
Oh my God.
If anybody was actually locked in.
So there's no way to get out of this, like, without being embarrassed.
Yes, exactly. It's basically a sure route to embarrassment. So that's really the concern here, is that some of these edge cases, well, not really edge cases, future cases have not really been addressed. It's more just about keeping users safe physically than it is for making sure that any of the private details or other information could be released. So it's a little bit disappointing to see how many different standards have been ignored or otherwise pushed off to the side because people just don't want to touch them. But there was one of my first introductions to Wiggle.net was a specific article that just said by war driving, you would be able to locate all of these specific smart sex toys and which homes they were residing in and make a giant map of them, which some researcher actually did. So if you're purchasing a device and you don't want to be like a hotspot on a map showing all the users of this device, then, you know, this sort of privacy and security is actually very important. So while I don't appreciate the chaotic nature of this retweet or the article title, I do appreciate how important it is to have cybersecurity standards on these sorts of devices as they become more popular. All right. So it's very typical to see internet disruptions when there's major political activity in countries that are trying to either do something sneaky or do a press blackout or otherwise make sure the opposition isn't able to organize. And in this case, earlier, we were able to see a substantial drop in the amount of internet traffic going through Sudan after there's a report of a military coup and detention of the prime minister. So it's pretty crazy to see this. I'm actually not sure if it's been restored. It's kind of been a little bit, let's see. Yeah, so you can see the mobile network offline started on the 25th and has been ongoing, but it looks like there was a restoration on Tuesday. But aside from that, this whole country has just been knocked offline. So obviously this makes it really difficult to get news out of the country. It makes it really difficult to communicate with other people. But the government effectively pulling the plug on the internet means that we're not getting a lot of information out. And it also is very, very typical of this sort of action happening in a lot of countries nowadays when if there's a coup or political action that is very disruptive, or I think India has also done this in certain areas where they'll just black out communications when they're expecting a demonstration or something to cause that's going to cause like a big reaction. They'll just block out the internet. So this is obviously pretty scary because if you're in that area, you have no idea what's going on. You have no way of communicating with anyone. And the government can use this as a tool to prevent people from learning what's happening in certain areas. So overall, like very sketchy, but it's interesting to have companies monitoring this information so we know when a country effectively pulls the plug on its internet and doesn't want people knowing what's going on there. All right, Alex, you got a story for me?
I don't think I have one pulled up at the moment.
All right, well, let's move on to my next one.
For you.
All right, so one thing that is very, very common is these supply chain attacks. Do you know what a supply chain attack is?
A little bit. I think I'll let you explain them so I don't mess it up.
All right, so a supply chain attack is basically something where vulnerable or like the victim of the attack is using a type of software on their system that is made by a third party. Then that third party gets breached in some way, shape, or form, and will actually be able to transfer that breach over to all their customers. So this is kind of like the SolarWinds kind of style attack, where once the parent company is breached of that third party, it can be then used to attack all of their customers if they are presenting themselves an opportunity to infiltrate those networks, which unfortunately SolarWinds did. So this time it's BillQuick. So this is something that is used by many different people. It's a pretty popular billing software. And unfortunately, it means that because these companies had integrated it and it was vulnerable, hackers were able to use that as a point to launch ransomware. So if you were using the service, they could potentially use it to load ransomware onto a third party. So this is pretty spooky, and it's now officially reported as a CVE. If you want to learn more about it, you can check out the article. But it's basically been addressed by a software update, but there are still people being hit by it. So the quote is, hackers can use this to access customers' BillQuick data, run malicious commands on their non-premises Windows server. Oh, and run commands on their non-premises Windows server. Huntress Labs. Oh, Huntress Labs is cool. But yeah, so obviously, if you have BillQuick, you're going to want to make sure to update this. But if you were recently hit by ransomware, then maybe that was why. But overall, like, these sorts of attacks are increasing because so many people will use software that's integrated into their system that provides an entry point. It's often easier to just go after the vendor and then choose through their list of clients than to go after all their clients individually. So these sorts of third parties represent a really, really juicy target to hackers when they're looking for these sorts of supply chain attacks. All right, and then this was really fascinating. So Wiggle.net published, as they said, the T on law enforcement and mobile phone location. So this is actually the FBI's guide on how to retrieve cellular data. And I really enjoyed reading this because I read almost the entire guide, but it talks about how to get data from AT&T, T-Mobile, and Verizon. And it shows the granular detail of all of the types of requests that can be granted, the limitations that these companies have on the kinds of data that is possible to be supplied about you. So some of this was also interesting to see that there's companies who will retain this data for almost 10 years or longer. So that means that some of these slides are just basically instructing the FBI agents in how to work with these companies and what their expectations should be for the kind of data that that company will have about a particular suspect or person that they're trying to investigate. I love some of the examples of cell phone towers designed to blend into the environment. I think that the cactuses are by far the most convincing.
Yeah, they're pretty inconspicuous.
Although the grain silo is like, it's a little too skinny for me, but I guess I can get with it. This one's like fine, I guess. But this one is just disrespectful in my opinion.
Is that in the middle of a graveyard?
I'm not sure. If it is in the middle of the graveyard, then I think it's very, very disrespectful. But anyway, so you can see some more of the slides here. It talks about like the amount of location-based services each provider has, the engineering data sets that you'll be expected to retrieve. And this is really interesting. So if you're someone who has just been curious about what kinds of information is being stored about you by your cellular provider and what FBI agents can expect to get from it, well, if you're using Sprint, they'll hold on to your data for 10 years. So if you basically ever use Sprint, then the subscriber information exists for 10 years. Although you can see US Cellular 7 years, Verizon 3 to 5 years, AT&T 7 years. So that's a lot of years. SMS tolls, cell site SMS 7 years. Man, that's a lot. So you can see there's lots of information. Look, oh, it stores video for 7 years. Voicemails, yes, all stored. So you can they can get all of your voicemails. Internet/web browsing, 1 year. Wow. So there really is a lot of data that's collected by these cell phone providers. And again, this is this actual PDF is very long. I've read the entire thing. If you want to go and check this out, I believe that it's one of the links here. Lets you just download the whole thing as a PDF and just, oh, here it is. It's not very well broken out. But there we go. So this is the actual data set itself. It is 139 pages, and it is an okay read. I appreciate whoever put these slides together, not making it so boring. But it is a fascinating view of the way that these technologies work, the way that modern investigators will access this information, and the limitations that they actually face. So again, if you're a big nerd and want to know about how this works, or if you're a criminal that's nervous about getting caught, then you should probably read this. But either way, I'm I guess, in the firmware category. And I think that this stuff is absolutely fascinating, just learning the way that this process works and what kind of information is stored. All right. Whoa, we've got more stuff. So the Raspberry Pi Zero 2W is here, and I'm really, really excited about this. If you want to read more about what one of the creators had to say about it, you can do so here. But really, I just want to give a shout out to this really awesome little board that we're looking forward to playing with. Eventually, we're not rushing to get it. We've got a lot of stuff going on with the Wi-Fi Nugget, but yeah, this is a really cool advancement in what the Pi Zero W, well, the Pi Zero 2W can do. It's one of my favorite Raspberry Pis, but it does have a lot of limitations. Like it can't do octoprint and it can't do a bunch of other stuff. So it being smaller and more powerful is really awesome, and I'm looking forward to playing with it when we get it. But yeah, it'll probably be a little while.
Unless supports octoprint, though, right?
I believe it does. Yeah, I believe it does. So if somebody wants to send us one of these, we'll mention you on it. Yeah, just go ahead and send us one. Hey, Alex, it's you.
Hey, nice.
So we released this a little bit ago, but I just wanted to thank Vernus for the shout out on our Hak5 episode that is now at 30-something thousand, I think. Let's see. Here we go. It is now at 33,000 views. So also lots of really positive feedback. Really appreciate everyone who gave us feedback on this episode. We really upped the production quality on it, and it was a lot of fun to make. So if you want to see a really great video we did recently, then check out the How Companies Survive Ransomware Attacks, or How Companies Catch Ransomware Hackers. Kind of each title works. But I thought this was a really great way of overviewing exactly how companies prepare themselves for ransomware attacks and why they're able to catch them. So a couple also really great anecdotes from our friend Killian on exactly how that has happened for a couple specific companies. All right. This is something I've been obsessed with, and I think we're actually going to make something about this happen. I just wanted to throw this out there and mention that Alex and I have been talking about using little microcontrollers to create honeypots. And this has already been done in some ways, but we wanted to make it super simple for people to generate and create a honeypot and basically make it so the device that we're using, in this case, like a little ESP8266, can connect itself to Wi-Fi and offer up something like a canary token or a Grabify honeypot as easily as possible. And we're hopefully going to be talking to some of the guys at Canary Token and see whether or not we can make this super, super simple and easy for users. So stay tuned to see what the result of this project is, but we're really excited to start looking at the process of making Wi-Fi honeypots that have the user in mind and don't require you to recompile Arduino sketches in order to get this set up. Because currently that's what you have to do, and we want to maybe make something that's a little bit more of an easy user experience. All right, I also want to shout out this video from Alex, spotting known Wi-Fi devices with the Wi-Fi Nugget. So if I go to the YouTube, Alex, you want to talk a little bit about what this sketch is doing?
Yeah, so I wrote a sketch called the Friend Detector, which can basically look for known devices that are flagged as like Wi-Fi friends or something like that. So it runs on the Wi-Fi Nugget and allows you to detect when known like smartphones or laptops are in the area by basically just flagging for their hardware address. So that would be like the MAC address of these devices. So since you can do like promiscuous Wi-Fi scanning on the ESP8266, this allows you to see like what types of Wi-Fi devices are in the area, types of packets they're sending, stuff like that. So it'll basically flag for when certain MAC addresses are in range and give you a visual indication of when these devices are spotted by putting out a cute little face on the Wi-Fi Nugget corresponding with different known devices.
Mm-hmm. So this one currently requires you to put in the address that you want to monitor and then compile the sketch in Arduino IDE. But future versions, we're hoping to make it even easier for you to be able to acquire which device you want to follow. This is just a really cool guide on being able to make your Wi-Fi Nugget, or really any ESP8266, react to a specific device being nearby. So I really like this. I thought it was super cool. And if you want to learn a little bit about how this works, then you should definitely check out this video on Hak5. All right, next up, does anybody know what this is?
Jeez.
Yeah, this is, so Alex and I have been printing cases for the Wi-Fi Nugget, and we finally had a failure that was so cursed it shut down our production for a couple of days. This is a complete encasement of a 3D printing nozzle by clear plastic. It was awful to get it off. It took a very long time, and it nearly destroyed the printer. So shout out to anybody else who's had this happen to them, because they understand my pain and how much time it took to fix this, because it actually was such a bad jam. It bent the nozzle and we had to rebend it back into place, which caused even further issues down the line. So again, I really like shouting out great resources, and these are some tools that I use all the time: Nmap, Dig, Netcat, Ping, TCP dump, SOCAT, Top, ETHTool. A lot of these are just kind of retweets of different cartoons that kind of cover this, but I learned so much from just reading these and kind of getting an understanding of like what all of these tools are for and the easiest way to use them. Because some of these flags I just either don't use or don't know or don't really like I haven't had somebody teach me like the best way to use them. So this is a great chain on talking about ping and trace route, or talking about ETHTool or Dig or any of these other Linux applications that are really, really useful, but are kind of underutilized because people might not realize all the potential they have. So really enjoyed this. And if you're looking for a great guide on how to use some of these Linux tools, I think this is a simple, great way to get set up with tools that are built into Linux and tend to be really, really useful. Well, not all of them are built into Linux, but a lot of these are built in Linux and tend to be really useful for a variety of different functions. All right, Alex, can you tell me what's wrong with the, well, first of all, can you tell me what this is?
Yeah, so this is the speedometer from a car that I bought like a few days ago. So I was told that
what was the car?
It was a 99 Toyota Camry.
Yeah, so this is a 99 Toyota Camry speedometer. We've opened it up and we're looking at the circuit board where everything's soldered.
Yeah, so I was told just the speedometer was broken, and I was like, oh, that's a pretty easy fix. Usually you can replace like a single little ceramic resonator that allows like the speedometer to go back to normal. Mm-hmm. But when I took the speedometer out, the first thing I noticed was somebody had already done a solder job on it, which was evidently a pretty bad job. And the thing they replaced was the flash chip that actually contains the odometer miles, which was tampered with.
Yes.
So it looks like they just put in a whole new one instead of flashing it themselves with a different mileage because they couldn't figure out how to do that.
Yeah, so this is the flash chip in question. And you might notice that it looks kind of new. Like compared to the rest of the board, it doesn't look that messed up. And that's because what I suspect happened here is they just ordered a new flash chip. They ripped the old one out of the board, and then they barely, I would barely call this soldering, but they barely managed to attach it back. But the way that they attached it back actually broke the speedometer. So the speedometer didn't work because they paid so much attention to basically resetting the odometer that it destroyed many of the solder joints on the back, because this person, again, was an idiot. So, you know, it looks like they used the element from a toaster to solder on these joints back on here. And you can see this is just like straight up shorted.
Yeah, look at the collateral damage too. Like they got the resistors that are there, everything else.
Yeah, the resistors. They
also got like this little, the corner of whatever that chip is.
Yeah. Yeah, this is an absolute mess. Like this also has been like drag soldered to hell. Like I don't know what happened here. Like, so this is shorting out. So this very well could be right here why the whole thing wasn't working, because it's clearly shorting some chip to like a ground.
That looks like a ground point.
Yeah. So lots of different ways that this could have been broken, but it's just really interesting. Did you know that you could be buying a used car that has had this done to it? And the only way you would really be able to tell would be to open it up and hope that they were just as terrible at soldering as this person was here, because otherwise they would have really gotten away with this. And for all we know, the mileage on the car was the mileage since there was a swap on this. So it's you know, it's just pretty wild that we found this. And fortunately, the buyer of the car was willing to take it back. He's actually been super cool about this whole process because he says he didn't know as well. We can't know that, so we had to be a little aggressive initially in making sure that we got the car returned. But the guy has actually been really, really awesome. So silent shout out to him, since I will not name him, for actually reducing my stress very much on this trip by taking the car back and doing the right thing. So yeah, very, very crazy. But that's what happens when you buy a used car. You never know. And nowadays, it's become a lot easier to roll back the odometer. So, you know, if you are looking for a used car, you feel like something's up, the miles are a little too low, you learn how to just pop open the speedometer cluster, or the gauge cluster. The gauge cluster, sorry. Then you can take a look and see whether or not this has been done to the vehicle. Again, if you're someone that likes to buy used cars, this might be worth checking. Because we took it to an inspection place and found like oil leaks and all sorts of indications of being a car that was much, much older than what it claimed to be before we found hard evidence that this had been tampered with. So pretty wild journey. But when it comes to hacking cars, this is probably the least cool way you can do it. And of course, it is a felony. So whoever was responsible for this is probably going to end up getting trouble by the DMV and a bunch of other people. So pretty wild ride, but it had a happy ending, at least it seems so. All right, so I don't play a lot of sports, but I also didn't know that you could defraud them for millions of dollars by illegally streaming copyrighted live games. Nice. And I guess someone in Minnesota who had access to their system for Major League basketball games was basically streaming this and making, I don't know if they were making money or what the whole deal was, but it just shows that a lot of these brands are not just worried about, ransomware, they're also worried about some of their precious content being basically stolen and then resold. So he had unauthorized access, and he was operating a pay-to-view website.
Oh wow!
From 2017 to August 2021. So I mean, it's
quite a hustle.
Then he allegedly hacked their computer systems and attempted to extort $150,000. So that is a court's potential sentence of 37 years, obviously. So I don't know if it was worth it, but this guy definitely had a hustle going on and took it too far. I think maybe it was the threatening the league for $150,000 that might have done him in, because it seemed like this other thing was bold as hell to begin with, but adding extortion on top of that, I guess, just was the straw that broke the camel's back on that one. All right, well. And then, of course, I have to give a shout out to the electronics wiring I learned from my friend Arsenis using magnet wire to create these light up sexy Squid Game subordinate costumes. So we actually got minion costumes, and they weren't, because of copyright reasons, they couldn't say minions. So I believe mine was the sexy subordinate costume.
No, yours was desirable me.
Oh, sorry, I was desirable me.
I was sexy subordinate.
Yeah, because they did not want to get sued. But well, maybe it'll load, maybe it won't. But these costumes lit up were very confusing, and we found out only too late, due to lack of testing, that, there we go. See, it changes color. People were very uncertain about this costume. So, all right, that's enough. So when the lights were red, you can see through these reflective visors perfectly clearly, no big deal. It was great. When it was green or blue, we were completely blind. We could not see anything. So we spent a night walking around in these like light up costumes, blind for about 75% of the time, and only being able to see through the red part when it would like switch there for 3 seconds every like 25 seconds or so. So it was quite a night of bumping into people, almost getting crushed by people in costumes, and then watching a lady in an angel costume almost beat up a homeless man and a dinosaur get released from handcuffs. Overall, a pretty good night. And then we're on to the metaverse. So it seems as that. So Alex, do you know what the metaverse is, or what it's envisioned to be?
I know it's just like something. It's a new form of stuff that Facebook created, vaguely dealing with like AR and like data, something like that.
VR.
Yeah.
They didn't really go with AR. They decided to go with VR, which is an interesting choice because VR makes me throw up. But they claim they've gotten better at it. I don't know about that. But basically, they're just like, hey, you know what's super fun and people would love to use this emerging technology for? Meetings. So everybody hates meetings. So now I guess you can like interpret your coworkers' facial expressions by staring at their avatar, maybe? Like, I don't know. It's like people in the comments are just like, this is revolutionary for everybody who's too afraid to turn on their camera in work meetings. And then everybody directly replying to that message is being like, I don't care about the facial expressions of people who are too afraid to turn their cameras on in work meetings. That doesn't help me. Does it help them? I don't know. So this is exciting. A great way to all exist in a virtual space and have a meeting. That's great. But honestly, I kind of agree with the send-off that the 2-hour ordeal of struggling with malfunctioning technology while wearing an irksome VR headset could have been an email. I don't also particularly trust having everything I do in that meeting with Facebook like leaning over my shoulder when Facebook also just decided to stop their decades-old facial recognition system, which was creating a huge trove of a billion users' facial recognition templates, meaning they could be recognized virtually anywhere. so do you really want to go putting all your face and movements and information into Facebook? I mean, for all I know, they're just going to analyze your movements until anytime you pick up a VR headset, they know it's you. So I just like, you know, like when it comes to contributing massive amounts of data to Facebook, they've historically proven that they'll just use that to create a profile that subverts your human will as much as possible and then sell it to the highest bidder. So I don't really see why the metaverse would be like a positive thing for most people, provided they don't want like a big brother company that's only interest is to sell you stuff, basically looming over your shoulder and sending you increasingly radicalized information as they slowly figure out what information you're most vulnerable to falling for. So as you can tell, I'm not a huge fan of Facebook, but I'm especially not a huge fan of information being collected about me that I didn't sign up for that could then be sold to other entities or used in a variety of different ways that I don't agree with. So I'm very happy that they are shutting down the facial recognition template, because they don't like, they're basically just using it to tag information and create metadata about who is in photos with who, or, you know, what types of relationship exists between people who might not even be signed up on Facebook. So I really don't like the thought of, you know, my information still being stored on Facebook, generating a facial recognition template for me, even though I've deleted my information from the platform. So yeah, this is good. This is a good thing. Keep pressuring Facebook, everyone, because it seems like they're slowly shutting down the more controversial stuff that they started not thinking about the harm it could do to society. And then now that society is aware that this stuff exists and is being abused, they suddenly don't like it. And Facebook is having to shut it down bit by bit. So keep it up. And I think that, oh, no, sorry. We got our final one. I love this. So I started following this guy on TikTok, and frankly, the stuff that he comes up with is such a cool blend of fashion and technology that I very rarely see people who are blending engineering skill and true like aesthetic, like interesting design that's bold and kind of pushes the boundaries of what technology and fashion can do. Again, I am obsessed with this guy. So I am hoping that provided he kind of shitposts on Twitter a lot, but that's fine. I'm hoping that there will be some more just things out from this guy that other people can try to create themselves. Like if this is open source, that would be really awesome, because I know that a lot of other people will try to make this and end up putting their own spin on it. But this project, which, is it gonna make me go to TikTok?
Oh, your favorite platform.
Here we go, let's go to TikTok. But this video is super, super cool. It demonstrates exactly how it works, and if it loads, then I'll show you. But if not, oh, okay, yeah, I actually haven't even seen this one. So,
hey everyone, I was able to get the headpiece to work for Halloween.
Okay, I'm gonna mute it just because this is a bunch of servos and a 3D printed design. It's controlled with a bunch of like, it looks so cool. So it'll basically like, it kind of reminds me of that outfit that had the curtains, where like the guy could just press a button and the curtains would just slowly close on the hat. This is even cooler in my opinion, just because it has more parts which could potentially fail. So having done electronic stuff before and also having the exact same soldering iron as this guy, I'm truly impressed by this project and I think it's so cool. So I'm gonna try to, I desperately want him to show off how he did this on Hak5 or like do some other related episode, because it's just like so cool. It's so cool. So anyway, all right, I think that that's everything I have for today. If you weren't aware of this awesome 3D printed / electronic art, then I'm glad that I shared that. And yeah, thank you everyone for joining us today. Hopefully we will be back in our normal studio, fully live next week. This trip is kind of dragged on a little bit later than we expected. But yeah, that's everything. That's everything. Alex, did I miss anything?
I don't think so.
All right. Really? What about NSO Group, huh?
Oh, do we have... I don't know if I have that pulled up.
Oh.
I do have this weird SIM swapping attack though, where this guy extorted like $784,000 worth of cryptocurrency for a SIM swap.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty terrifying. And it turns out it's like the same guy that dates back to when Twitter was taken over with a crypto hack.
Whoa.
Yeah, that's pretty spooky.
I only vaguely remember this. I remember some kid in Florida got arrested for it. But okay, well, yeah. What we talked about earlier was how the United States government has put NSO Group on a list of entities that are restricted. So basically, that means that United States companies cannot sell technology to them. It can't be hardware, it can't be software. They are now have been found to basically be involved in activities that are contrary to the interests of the United States. So that doesn't like there are stronger steps the United States could take, but it does send a pretty clear signal that these groups won't be tolerated when they're targeting journalists and human rights defenders. So it looks like it's become a little bit more difficult for these groups to operate, but also they're used to operating in the shadows. So I'm not sure that this is actually going to have a huge effect on them, but it is a really positive sign that this is no longer being tolerated.
Yes.
Okay, all right. That's all we've got for today. I'm not going to ask anymore because I'm afraid of the answer. But we'll see you guys next week. And if you have any questions for our Q&A, make sure to drop them either on our YouTube channel or you can drop them on my Twitter, and we will answer them live on our next Q&A session. See you next time. Bye.